My partner accused me of giving his daughter a terrible gift that made her cry, but I had evidence of the kid deliberately breaking everything while smiling and saying, "Mommy will pay for something more expensive." Now the father is in complete shock, and the baby has no idea what consequences await her. Hey Reddit, this story starts with a music box, but not just any music box. It was a hand-carved mahogany piece with inlaid mother of pearl that had been in my family for generations. My grandmother had given it to my mother, who passed it down to me when I turned 17. For 4 generations, the women in my family had received this precious heirloom on their 17th birthday. And despite being a stepmother, I wanted to continue this meaningful tradition with Isabella. I've been married to Isabella's father, Robert, for almost 8 years now. I first met him when Isabella was only 10 years old, and I've spent the better part of a decade trying to build a genuine relationship with her. The situation was complicated from the start. Robert's ex-wife had passed away when Isabella was just 8, so thankfully, I never had to deal with the classic evil ex-wife scenario that many blended families face. However, Isabella made it crystal clear from day one that she didn't want a replacement mother. I tried my best to respect that boundary. I never pushed her to call me mom, never forced awkward family bonding activities on her, and simply tried to be there, consistent and caring from a distance when needed, stepping in only when invited. It was a delicate dance that required patience and understanding. Over the years, I genuinely thought we had made some progress in our relationship, building a foundation of mutual respect if not maternal love. Then came Isabella's 17th birthday, and everything changed. Robert and I had discussed her gifts extensively beforehand. He had gone all out, purchasing her the latest Samsung Galaxy phone, designer clothes from Nordstrom, and concert tickets to see her favorite band. These were flashy, expensive gifts that any teenager would love. I decided to give her something more personal and meaningful, my grandmother's music box. The night before her birthday, I wrapped it carefully in silver paper with a deep blue ribbon. It wasn't flashy like Robert's gifts, but it carried decades of family history and love. I attached a card explaining the significance of the piece, hoping she would understand the gesture for what it truly was. An invitation, not an obligation. It was my way of saying that she was family to me, even though I wasn't trying to replace her mother. The birthday party itself was a lavish affair. Robert's guilt for working so much always manifested in extravagance when it came to Isabella's special occasions. He had invited about 60 of Isabella's closest friends, hired a professional DJ, arranged for professional catering, and basically turned our home into a party venue with all the bells and whistles. Isabella was the quintessential birthday princess that day, stunning in her new designer dress and surrounded by adoring friends who laughed at her every joke and complimented her every move. When gift time finally arrived, she tore through the packages with the unbridled excitement of someone who had never been told no in her life. The new Samsung Galaxy phone elicited genuine squeals of delight, and the concert tickets prompted huge, enthusiastic hugs for her father. Then came my small silver package, sitting modestly among the pile of larger, more elaborate gifts. "What's this?" she asked, looking at the small silver package with obvious suspicion, as if wondering why anyone would give her something so understated. "Open it," I said, trying my best to keep my voice light and encouraging. "It's something special." The room had quieted somewhat as her friends watched with idle curiosity to see what this smaller gift might contain. As she carefully peeled back the wrapping paper and lifted the lid to reveal the music box inside, her expression flickered through a range of emotions. First confusion, then unmistakable disappointment, quickly masked with a polite smile that didn't even come close to reaching her eyes. "Oh, thanks," she said flatly, her voice completely devoid of enthusiasm as she already began reaching for the next gift in the pile. "Wait," I said, stopping her with a gentle hand. I knew I needed to explain the significance before the moment was completely lost. "It's a music box that's been in my family for generations. My grandmother gave it to my mother, who gave it to me on my 17th birthday. I wanted you to have it. I wanted you to have..." She looked at me then. Really looked at me. And for just a moment, I thought I saw something genuine flicker in her eyes. Maybe it wasn't gratitude, but perhaps recognition of the gesture's significance and the family history I was trying to share with her. She carefully placed the music box aside and continued with her other gifts, but I noticed she handled it with more care than her initial reaction had suggested. Later, as the party wound down and guests started leaving with their party favors and leftover cake, I noticed that the music box had disappeared from the gift table. I assumed Isabella had taken it to her room, which gave me a small flutter of hope that maybe, just maybe, she had understood what the gift meant after all. That small flutter of hope I had been nurturing was destined to be short-lived. 4 days after the birthday party, Isabella came downstairs for breakfast with noticeably red-rimmed eyes, looking genuinely distressed about something. "What's wrong, honey?" Robert asked immediately, his parental instincts kicking into high alert as he noticed her obvious distress. She sniffled dramatically, her voice trembling as she delivered the devastating news. "The music box. It's broken." My heart absolutely sank at those words. This was the last thing I had expected to hear, especially about something that had survived so much throughout its long history. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the growing concern in my chest. "I don't know," she said, her voice continuing to tremble with what appeared to be genuine emotion. "I just found it like that this morning. The lid is cracked and it won't play music anymore." Robert immediately wrapped his protective arm around her, his fatherly instincts taking over completely. "We'll get it fixed, sweetheart. Don't worry about that." "But that's not the point," she said, as tears began spilling over and running down her cheeks. "It was special, and now it's ruined. I feel terrible about it." I felt absolutely sick to my stomach hearing this news. That music box had survived 2 devastating world wars, the Great Depression and countless family moves across different countries and continents. It had been played regularly for over a century without ever breaking or showing significant wear. The mechanism had been incredibly well made and durable. And now, after just 4 days in Isabella's possession, it was suddenly damaged beyond repair. "Can I see it?" I asked, working hard to keep my voice neutral and non-accusatory, though alarm bells were already starting to ring in my mind. "It's in my room," she mumbled, not meeting my eyes as she spoke. I immediately went upstairs to assess the damage for myself. What I found made my blood run cold. The beautiful mahogany lid had a jagged crack running directly through it, splitting the wood in an unnatural way. More concerning, the delicate mechanism inside had been completely crushed, with tiny metal pieces scattered and bent beyond any hope of repair. This was clearly damage from deliberate force, not from age, accident, or normal wear and tear. This wasn't coincidental damage at all. Someone had deliberately and methodically broken this precious family heirloom. As I held the broken pieces carefully in my hands, I felt a cold clarity wash over me like ice water. I had suspected for years that Isabella's sweet facade might be hiding something darker underneath. Something that Robert consistently refused to see or acknowledge. This devastating discovery confirmed my worst suspicions about her true character. I took the broken music box downstairs where Robert and Isabella were sitting at the kitchen island. Isabella's tears had magically dried up while I was upstairs, and she was casually scrolling through her phone as if nothing had happened. However, those tears returned right on cue the moment she saw me approaching with the damaged pieces in my hands. "This wasn't an accident," I said quietly but firmly, setting the broken pieces on the counter where both of them could see the extent of the damage clearly. "Someone broke this deliberately." Robert's expression immediately hardened, his protective instincts for his daughter overriding any logical analysis of the situation. "What are you implying?" he asked, his tone growing defensive. Before I could even formulate a proper response, Isabella burst into fresh tears, her voice rising with what sounded like genuine hurt and indignation. "You think I did this on purpose? Why would I do something like that? It's not like I even wanted that old thing anyway." And there it was, the truth slipping out in her moment of defensive anger, revealing exactly how she really felt about my precious family gift. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice steady despite the shock of hearing her real feelings spoken so plainly. Robert immediately stood up, positioning himself physically between us like a human shield. "That's enough. She's upset, and you're making accusations without any proof." "I'm not making accusations," I replied, keeping my voice as steady and calm as possible, despite the situation escalating around us. "I'm simply stating facts. This music box survived 100 years without breaking. The damage isn't from normal wear and tear. It's from someone deliberately smashing the delicate mechanism inside." "So what, you installed cameras in my room now?" Isabella sneered, her tears vanishing as quickly as they had appeared, replaced by obvious hostility and defiance. "No," I said calmly, "but I did install a comprehensive security system throughout the house 4 months ago. Remember? It was right after that string of break-ins in our neighborhood that had everyone concerned." Robert frowned, clearly not understanding where I was going with this line of reasoning. "What does that security system have to do with anything?" I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. my heart pounding as I prepared to reveal what I had discovered. The cameras caught something very interesting the night after your birthday party, Isabella. Her face immediately changed color, all the blood draining from her cheeks as the implications of my words hit her. I turned the phone toward both of them and pressed play on the damning footage. The footage was crystal clear, leaving absolutely no room for doubt or alternative interpretation. There was Isabella in her bedroom, holding the music box in her hands. At first, she actually seemed to be examining it with genuine curiosity, opening the lid to hear the delicate tune play its centuries-old melody. For a brief moment, I almost thought I had been wrong about her intentions. Then her expression changed completely. She looked toward her bedroom door as if to make absolutely sure no one was coming to check on her. Once she was confident she was alone and unobserved, she deliberately dropped the precious music box to the floor with calculated force. When the initial drop didn't break it to her apparent satisfaction, the box was well made and sturdy after all, she took things a step further. She stepped on it with her heel, crushing the delicate internal mechanism with deliberate, methodical pressure. The sound of the tiny metal pieces breaking was audible even through the security camera's audio. "I don't need her stupid family heirloom," she said to herself, actually laughing as she surveyed the destruction she had just caused. "Dad will feel so bad about this that he'll probably make her buy me something way better to make up for it." Robert watched the entire footage in stunned, absolute silence. His face grew progressively paler with each passing second as he witnessed his daughter's calculated cruelty and manipulation. When the video finally ended, he looked at Isabella as if he was seeing her for the very first time in her 17 years of life. "Isabella," he whispered, his voice barely audible and filled with heartbreak. "Tell me that's not real. Tell me that video was somehow faked or edited." She crossed her arms defensively, any pretense of remorse or sadness completely abandoned now that she had been caught red-handed. "It's just a stupid old music box," she said with shocking callousness. "Who cares about some ancient piece of junk?" "I care," Robert said, his voice breaking with emotion as the full weight of what his daughter had done sank in. That belonged to her family for generations. It was irreplaceable. Isabella rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair that only a teenager could muster. "So what? She's not even my real mom anyway. Why should I have to take her hand-me-downs when you buy me brand new everything? I deserve better than some old, broken-down antique." I remained completely silent during this exchange, letting them have this crucial moment between father and daughter. This was something that Robert needed to handle on his own, without any interference or input from me. He needed to see who his daughter really was and decide how to respond to that revelation. "Go to your room," he said finally, his voice unnaturally calm in a way that was somehow more frightening than if he had been shouting. "We'll discuss this later when I've had time to process what I just witnessed." "But Dad!" she started to protest, clearly not expecting such a measured but serious response. "Now," he said firmly, cutting off any argument she might have been planning to make. She stomped upstairs dramatically, slamming her bedroom door hard enough to rattle the framed pictures hanging on the hallway wall. Robert collapsed onto one of the bar stools, putting his head in his hands as if the weight of the revelation was too much to bear. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. "I had no idea she could be so deliberately cruel and calculating." "I know you didn't," I said gently, gathering the broken pieces of the music box with careful hands. "But now you do, and that's what matters." The next few days in our household were incredibly tense and uncomfortable for everyone involved. Robert tried repeatedly to have serious conversations with Isabella about what had happened, but she alternated between defiant indifference and calculated tears depending on what she thought would be most effective in the moment. She consistently insisted that I was trying to drive a wedge between her and her father, claiming that I had always been jealous of their close relationship and was looking for any excuse to cause problems. "She probably broke it herself just to make me look bad," I overheard her telling Robert one night through their closed door, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "Think about it, Dad. Who else would have access to the security footage? She could have easily staged the whole thing." "The video clearly shows you breaking it with your own hands," Robert responded, his voice heavy with exhaustion from these circular arguments that seemed to go nowhere. "She could have edited it," Isabella replied, without missing a beat, always ready with another excuse or deflection. "You know how good people are with technology these days. She probably learned how to do it on YouTube or something." Their arguments continued going in these frustrating circles for days, with Isabella refusing to take any real responsibility for her actions. I deliberately stayed out of these discussions, giving Robert the space he needed to parent his daughter without any interference from me. I didn't want him to feel like I was pressuring him or trying to manipulate the situation in any way. However, I also didn't pretend that everything was fine and back to normal. I stopped doing the little things I normally did to make Isabella's life easier and more comfortable. I didn't cook her favorite meals anymore, didn't do her laundry, and didn't edit her school papers like I had been doing regularly for years. I simply stepped back and let natural consequences take their course, allowing her to experience what life was like without my voluntary help and support. A week after the devastating incident with the music box, Robert came to me with a new determination in his eyes that I hadn't seen in quite some time. "We need to have a serious talk about Isabella," he said with resolve. I nodded, setting aside the book I had been reading to give him my full attention. "I'm listening to whatever you want to discuss." "I've been completely blind," he admitted honestly, sitting down beside me on the couch with a heavy sigh. "Not just about the music box incident, but about everything. The way she speaks to you when I'm not around to hear it, the way she manipulates situations to her advantage, the way she shows no genuine remorse for hurting people. I've let this behavior go on for far too long." I took his hand gently, still wanting to give him an opportunity to reconsider. "She lost her mother at such a young age. It's completely natural for her to have complicated feelings about our family situation. Stop making excuses for her behavior," he said firmly, surprising me with his directness. "That's exactly what I've been doing for years, and look where it's gotten us. She's 17 years old, more than old enough to know right from wrong and to understand the consequences of her actions." "So what do you want to do about it?" I asked, curious about what kind of plan he might have in mind. He squeezed my hand meaningfully and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I have an idea, but I'm going to need your help to make it work properly." The plan Robert had devised was elegantly simple in its execution. He would tell Isabella that he had a special surprise waiting for her, a 17th birthday do-over gift to make up for the disappointment and trauma of the broken music box incident. She would be absolutely thrilled, of course, believing that she had successfully won this battle and manipulated the situation to her advantage once again. "Meet me in your room at 4 o'clock this afternoon," he told her casually at breakfast the next morning, his tone warm and affectionate. "I have something very special planned for you." She practically bounced in her seat with barely contained excitement, her eyes lighting up like a child on Christmas morning. "What is it? Can't you just tell me now? I hate waiting for surprises." "That would completely ruin the surprise," he said, with what appeared to be a genuinely warm smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes if you knew how to look for such things. "Just be in your room at exactly 4 o'clock, and everything will become clear." I spent that entire day at my sister's house, ostensibly giving father and daughter the privacy they needed for their special surprise moment. In reality, I was there picking up the final, crucial piece of our carefully orchestrated plan. My sister Victoria had been working as a professional furniture restorer for 22 years, and when I had brought her the broken music box the day after the incident occurred, she had shaken her head sadly while examining the extensive damage. "The internal mechanism is completely destroyed beyond any hope of repair," she had told me with genuine regret in her voice. "And the wood is split along the natural grain in a way that's very difficult to fix properly. I can make it look whole again on the outside, restore the appearance to something close to its original beauty, but it will never play music the way it used to. The melody is gone forever." "That's perfectly all right," I had told her at the time. "Just do your very best with what you have to work with." And she had done exactly that, working her restoration magic with the skill that came from decades of experience. The repaired music box looked almost brand new when she finished with it. The crack in the mahogany lid was barely visible, unless you knew exactly where to look for it, and the exterior had been polished to a lustrous, high shine that made it gleam like it had in its younger days. Only the music was permanently gone. The delicate pins and cylinder that had created that beautiful melody for over a century were now completely irreparable, destroyed beyond any craftsman's ability to fix. Like trust, once it's been deliberately broken, some things can appear whole again on the surface, but are fundamentally changed forever. Never quite the same as they were before the damage was done. I returned home at exactly 3:30 in the afternoon, the carefully repaired music box secured in a simple brown bag. Robert met me at the front door, his expression solemn and focused as he prepared for what was about to unfold. "Is everything ready for this?" I asked quietly, making sure we were both prepared for the confrontation ahead. He nodded grimly. "She's been in her room all day, texting her friends excitedly about what her amazing dad might have bought for her this time. She's expecting something expensive and impressive. And the other part of our plan? They're all here, waiting patiently in the guest room just as we discussed. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to happen. Then let's do this. At exactly 4 o'clock sharp, Robert knocked firmly on Isabella's bedroom door. I stood a few feet back, positioned out of her direct line of sight, but close enough to hear every word of the conversation that was about to unfold. "Come in!" she called excitedly, her voice practically bubbling over with anticipation for whatever expensive surprise she believed was waiting for her. Robert entered the room, and I immediately heard Isabella's disappointed "oh" when she realized he wasn't carrying any packages, gift bags, or boxes that might contain her expected treasure. "Where's my surprise?" she asked, confusion and disappointment evident in her voice as she looked around the room for something she might have missed. "I need to talk to you first," Robert said, his voice taking on a serious tone that clearly wasn't what Isabella had been expecting to hear. "About what?" she asked, her excitement beginning to fade as she sensed that this conversation might not be heading in the direction she had hoped. "About the music box," he replied simply. I heard her exasperated sigh even from my position in the hallway. "Are we seriously still on that topic? I thought we had moved past all of this drama. I said I was sorry about what happened." "No, you didn't, not once," Robert corrected her firmly. "You never actually apologized for what you did." There was a pause before Isabella responded with obvious irritation. "Well, I am sorry then. Are you happy now? Can I please have my surprise?" "Isabella," Robert said, his voice remaining steady and controlled. "I want you to understand something very important. That music box wasn't just some random gift that Maya picked up at a store. It represented Maya's acceptance of you as family. It was her way of saying that she genuinely cares about you, that she considers you her daughter even though you're not related by blood." "But she's not," Isabella started to interrupt. "Let me finish," Robert said firmly, cutting off her protest before she could complete the thought. "What you did wasn't just disrespectful to Maya. It was deliberately cruel, calculated, and vicious. And then you lied about it repeatedly, tried to make her look bad and paranoid, and showed absolutely zero genuine remorse even after being caught red-handed with video evidence." "Dad, she tried again. "I am not finished," he said, with an authority in his voice that I rarely heard him use. "I've been thinking a lot about how we got to this point, what role I played in allowing this behavior to continue, and I've realized something important. I failed you as a father." Her voice immediately turned contrite and manipulative, switching tactics as she recognized the shift in his tone. "No, Dad, you haven't failed me. You're the best dad ever. You give me everything I want." "No, I'm not the best dad ever," he replied sadly. "A good father teaches his children fundamental values like respect, honesty, gratitude, and empathy. I've been so focused on making sure you had material things, on trying to compensate for the loss of your mother, that I forgot to make sure you developed good character." I could hear her starting to cry now, and these sounded like real tears for the first time, not the manufactured ones she typically produced on command when she wanted something. "Dad, please, I'm sorry. I'll apologize to Maya properly this time. I'll be better, I promise." "I hope so," he said softly, his voice filled with both love and disappointment. "Because there are always consequences to how we treat people, especially those who care about us." That was my cue to enter the room. I stepped through the doorway, carrying the repaired music box carefully in my hands. Isabella's tear-streaked face registered complete confusion as she saw me enter her room carrying something in my hands. "Maya, what are you doing here? I thought this was supposed to be my surprise from Dad." "I brought you something," I said calmly, setting the repaired music box down on her desk where she could see it clearly. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked back at me with growing bewilderment. "You fixed it? But how? I thought it was completely broken beyond repair." "My sister did the restoration work," I corrected her gently. "She was able to repair the outside, make it look whole again. But it will never play music the way it used to. The internal mechanism was too severely damaged to ever function properly again." Isabella suddenly had the decency to look genuinely ashamed for the first time since this whole ordeal began. "I'm really sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I honestly don't know why I did something so terrible." "I think you do know why," I said gently but firmly. "You did it because you thought you could get away with it. Because you believed there would be no real consequences for your actions. Because you've been taught, whether intentionally or not, that your immediate feelings and desires are more important than other people's treasures, memories, and family history." Robert moved to stand beside me, presenting a united front that Isabella had rarely seen from us before. But there are always consequences, Isabella. Sometimes they're just delayed rather than immediate. What? What do you mean by that? She asked, looking between us nervously as she began to sense that something bigger was happening here than just a conversation about the music box. Robert walked over to her bedroom door and opened it wide. "You can come in now," he called out into the hallway, and through the door walked my sister Victoria, the one who had painstakingly restored the music box. She was followed by my mother Catherine, walking with the dignified bearing that had carried her through decades of raising 4 daughters. Then came my elderly grandmother Margaret in her wheelchair, being carefully pushed by my youngest sister Nicole. The small bedroom suddenly felt very crowded with all these unfamiliar faces. Isabella's eyes widened in shock and growing alarm. "Who are they? Why are all these people here?" "This is my family," I explained calmly. "My sisters Victoria and Nicole, my mother Catherine, and my grandmother Margaret, the woman who first owned that music box over 70 years ago." Grandma Margaret fixed Isabella with a penetrating stare that had intimidated and commanded respect from generations of children and grandchildren. At 94 years old, she was still sharp as a tack mentally and took absolutely no nonsense from anyone, regardless of their age. "So," she said in her crisp, no-nonsense voice that cut through the tension in the room like a knife, "you're the girl who destroyed my music box." Isabella seemed to physically shrink under her intense gaze, clearly not prepared for this level of direct confrontation. I didn't mean to break it," she stammered weakly. "Don't lie to me, child," Grandma Margaret said sternly. "I've seen the video footage with my own eyes. You knew exactly what you were doing." My mother Catherine stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of decades of family history and pride. "That music box survived the bombing of London during World War II, she said, her eyes never leaving Isabella's face. "My mother was just a little girl then, hiding in the underground stations with nothing but that box and the clothes on her back. It was one of the few possessions our family managed to keep through those terrifying nights." Victoria, my sister, who had worked so hard to restore the damaged piece, added her own memory to the narrative. "It survived the house fire that took our first family home when we were children. Everything else was lost to the flames, but that music box was one of the only things we managed to save from the destruction." Nicole, my youngest sister, spoke up with emotion in her voice. "It was played at each of our weddings, a tradition that connected all of our most important family moments. And it played at our father's funeral, bringing comfort during one of the darkest days of our lives." Grandma Margaret wheeled herself closer to Isabella, her presence commanding the full attention of everyone in the room. "That box wasn't just wood and metal, child. It was a piece of our history, our family story, our legacy. It held memories of love, loss, celebration, and sorrow spanning nearly a century." Isabella was crying now, real tears of shame and genuine remorse as the full weight of what she had destroyed began to sink in. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't know about any of that history. I didn't understand what it meant." "No," Grandma Margaret agreed with stern honesty. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You saw something old and immediately assumed it had no value because it wasn't shiny and new and expensive. You made no effort to understand its significance before you decided to destroy it." Robert placed a firm but gentle hand on my shoulder, his voice carrying new authority as he addressed his daughter. "I want you to understand something very important, Isabella. When I married Maya, I didn't just get a wife. I got her entire family, her history, her traditions. These people are now your family too, whether you choose to acknowledge and respect them or not. And family," my mother said with quiet firmness that brooked no argument, "does not deliberately destroy family heirlooms out of spite, jealousy, or manipulation." Isabella looked around the room at all these faces, people who were now part of her extended family, people whose precious memories she had carelessly trampled. She appeared as if she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had done. "I'll pay for it," she offered desperately, grasping for some way to make amends. "I'll use all of my allowance money, my birthday money, everything I have saved up." "Some things can't be bought, child," Grandma Margaret said, with the wisdom that came from nearly a century of life experience. "Some things, once broken, can never truly be fixed or replaced. The music that box played for generations is gone forever." I knelt down in front of Isabella, taking her trembling hands gently in mine as I looked directly into her eyes. "But people can change," I said softly, offering her hope despite everything that had happened. People can learn and grow and make genuine amends for their mistakes. She looked up at me through her tears, her face streaked with genuine remorse for the first time since I had known her. How? How can I possibly fix this? How can I make up for something so terrible? You can start, Robert said with quiet determination, by understanding the true value of things beyond their price tags, by treating people with respect and kindness, even when you think no one is watching your behavior. Grandma Margaret nodded approvingly at her son-in-law's words. And then, young lady, you can come visit me every single Sunday for the next year. I have many stories to tell you about that music box, about our family history, about what really matters in this world. Every Sunday? Isabella asked, her eyes widening at the commitment being asked of her. Every single one, Robert confirmed without hesitation. No phones, no friends, no distractions of any kind. Just you and Margaret talking about life, history, and family. And listening, Grandma added pointedly, fixing Isabella with another one of her penetrating stares. Lots and lots of listening. The drive to my grandmother's retirement community that first Sunday was completely silent and tense. Isabella sat in the back seat staring out the window with a dejected expression, her normally active phone lying untouched in her lap. As part of her punishment, Robert had confiscated all of her electronics except for a basic flip phone that she was only allowed to use for genuine emergencies. When we arrived at the retirement community, Grandma Margaret was already waiting on her small porch, a thick photo album open on her lap. She had been a true force of nature in her younger years, a passionate civil rights activist, a dedicated teacher who had shaped countless young minds, and a world traveler who had seen things most people only read about in books. Even at 94 years old, she still commanded immediate respect from everyone who met her. Right on time, she nodded approvingly as we helped Isabella out of the car. Come sit here beside me, Isabella. I have many important stories to tell you about life, family, and what really matters. Isabella looked back at us uncertainly, clearly hoping for some kind of rescue or reprieve from this uncomfortable situation. We'll be back at exactly 5 o'clock, Robert said, his tone not unkind but absolutely firm about the arrangement. Listen more than you speak and try to learn something important. We left them there on that sunny porch. Isabella perched awkwardly on the porch swing, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. And Grandma Margaret already launched into an animated story about her childhood in post-war England, complete with gestures and vivid descriptions. Do you honestly think this approach will work? I asked Robert as we drove away from the retirement community, leaving his daughter in the capable hands of my formidable grandmother. He reached over and took my hand, intertwining our fingers as he considered the question. If anyone in this world can get through to her and teach her what she needs to learn, it's Margaret. That woman successfully raised 4 daughters during some of the hardest times in recent history, and she never once broke under the pressure. Unlike my precious music box, I said with a small, sad smile, still mourning the loss of that beautiful melody that would never play again. I'm still so incredibly sorry about that, he said, his voice heavy with regret and guilt. I should have seen what she was capable of long before it got to this point. I know you are, but maybe something genuinely good can come out of this terrible situation, I replied thoughtfully. Maybe this is exactly what Isabella needed, to understand that actions have real consequences, that people have complex histories and feelings, that things have stories and meaning beyond their surface appearance, and that stepmothers have families who love them deeply, he added softly, squeezing my hand with gentle affection. The change in Isabella didn't happen overnight. Real personal growth never does. The first few Sundays, she remained sullen and withdrawn, answering Grandma's thoughtful questions with minimal words and obvious reluctance. But Grandma Margaret was infinitely patient and persistently engaging, continuing her fascinating stories whether Isabella seemed genuinely interested or not. By the 3rd Sunday, Isabella was actually asking questions about the stories she was hearing. By the 5th Sunday, she was bringing a notebook to write down important details and family facts. By the 8th Sunday, she was arriving with questions prepared in advance, genuinely interested in learning more about Grandma's remarkable life and our family's complex history. At home, the changes in Isabella's behavior and attitude were equally gradual, but unmistakable. She became quieter and more thoughtful in her interactions with everyone. She started helping with dinner preparation without being asked or reminded. She stopped slamming doors when she was frustrated or angry. She even began saying, please and thank you regularly. Small courtesies that shouldn't have felt revolutionary, but somehow absolutely did after years of her previous behavior. One evening, about 3 months after the devastating music box incident, Isabella knocked softly on our bedroom door. Her demeanor was completely different from the defiant, entitled girl we had dealt with for so many years. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, looking directly at me with an earnestness I had never seen from her before. "Not Robert specifically. I mean you, Maya." "Of course you can," I replied, setting aside the book I had been reading to give her my complete attention. Robert started to move toward the door to give us privacy, but Isabella stopped him with a gentle gesture. "You can stay, Dad. You should hear this conversation too." She sat carefully on the edge of our bed, her hands twisting nervously in her lap as she clearly struggled to find the right words for what she wanted to say. "I've been thinking a lot about what I did with the music box," she began, her voice quiet but steady. "Really thinking about it, not just trying to avoid getting in trouble." I nodded encouragingly, waiting patiently for her to continue at her own pace. "I was jealous," she admitted with painful honesty. "Not of you exactly, but of what you represented in our lives. This whole other existence that Dad had that didn't include my mom, didn't include the way things used to be before she died." Robert started to speak, but Isabella held up her hand, showing a maturity I had never witnessed from her before. "Let me finish saying what I need to say, please. I thought that if I pushed you away hard enough and long enough, everything would somehow go back to how it was before you came into our lives. But Grandma Margaret helped me understand something really important. That's not how life actually works. We don't get to go back to previous chapters. We can only move forward and try to make the next chapters better." She reached into her pocket and carefully pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I can't replace what I broke. I understand that now, but I wanted to give you this." Inside the delicate wrapping was a beautiful silver locket, clearly antique and obviously expensive for a teenager's budget. When I opened it, I found tiny photos of my grandmother as a young woman on one side and my mother on the other. The exact same photos that had been lovingly displayed inside the music box's lid for so many years. "Grandma Margaret gave me copies of those photographs," Isabella explained, watching my face carefully for my reaction. "I saved up money from doing chores and odd jobs at the retirement community to buy this locket. I thought maybe you could continue the family tradition differently now. Maybe someday you could add a picture of yourself to keep the chain going." Her voice grew softer as she continued. "And then when I'm older, and hopefully much less stupid than I am now, maybe my daughter could add her picture too, and the tradition could continue in a new way." I felt tears welling up in my eyes as I held this thoughtful, meaningful gift. "Isabella, this is absolutely beautiful and so incredibly thoughtful." "It's not the same as the music box," she said, looking down at her hands with obvious regret. "I know that nothing can ever truly replace what I destroyed. But Grandma Margaret says that family traditions sometimes need to change and evolve to survive," she continued. "Like how she had to leave everything behind in England to start a completely new life here in America." Robert was watching his daughter with unmistakable pride, seeing growth and maturity that he had hoped for, but wasn't sure would ever come. "That's very thoughtful and wise, Isabella," he said warmly. "There's something else," she added, pulling out her phone with excitement. "I've been recording Grandma's stories with her permission, of course. I thought maybe we could put them all together somehow, like create an oral history of your family that could be preserved forever." I couldn't help myself. I pulled her into a tight, emotional hug. After a moment's hesitation, she hugged me back with genuine warmth. "I'm really, truly sorry," she whispered against my shoulder. "For everything I did. For all the ways I hurt you and disrespected your family." "I know you are," I said softly, "and I forgive you completely." A year after the life-changing incident with the music box, we celebrated Isabella's 18th birthday with a much smaller, more intimate gathering. Gone were the days of lavish parties with 60 teenagers and professional entertainment. Instead, we had just family present. My sisters Victoria and Nicole, my mother Catherine, and of course Grandma Margaret, still holding court from her wheelchair with the same sharp wit and wisdom that had transformed my stepdaughter's character. The broken music box now sat prominently on our mantel, no longer hidden away in shame, but displayed as a powerful reminder. It wasn't a symbol of betrayal anymore, but rather of growth, learning, and the possibility of redemption. It no longer played its beautiful melody, but it had taught a far more important lesson than any tune could ever convey about responsibility, respect, and the true meaning of family. Isabella had become Grandma Margaret's most devoted apprentice over the course of that transformative year. She spent countless hours not just listening to stories, but actively recording them, carefully scanning old family photographs, and creating a comprehensive digital archive of our family's rich history. Her project had grown beyond just our family. She had started interviewing other residents at the retirement community, preserving their fascinating life stories for posterity as well. You know, Grandma Margaret said to me thoughtfully as we watched Isabella patiently showing my mother how to use a new smartphone app she had discovered. Sometimes, the most beautiful and meaningful things in life come from broken places, from moments when everything seems lost. I thought about the jagged crack that still ran through the music box's mahogany lid, now filled with gold lacquer in the Japanese tradition of kintsugi, the art of treating breakage and repair as part of an object's history rather than something to disguise or hide. The technique celebrates the idea that something can be more beautiful for having been broken. "She's going to be okay," I said with quiet confidence, watching my stepdaughter laugh genuinely with my mother as they worked together on the phone. "More than okay, actually." Grandma Margaret patted my hand with her weathered but still strong fingers. "Better than okay, my dear. She's going to be absolutely extraordinary. Sometimes the greatest growth comes from the deepest mistakes." The music box would never play its centuries-old tune again. That melody was lost forever, silenced by a moment of spite and cruelty. But in its profound silence, a different kind of harmony had slowly emerged over the months. It was a harmony built on understanding, genuine forgiveness, and the complex but beautiful melody that real families create together. Not perfect, not unbroken, but incredibly strong in all the mended places where love and patience had worked their quiet magic. As I looked around at this gathering, my husband, my stepdaughter, my extended family all together in genuine happiness, I realized that this imperfect, reconstructed harmony was actually the greatest gift of all. The music box had served its purpose after all, just not in the way any of us had originally expected. Sometimes the most precious family heirlooms aren't the ones that survive intact, but the ones that teach us how to heal, how to grow, and how to love each other despite our deepest flaws. Isabella caught my eye across the room and smiled. A real smile, full of warmth and genuine affection. In that moment, I knew that while the music box's melody was gone forever, the song of our family would continue playing for generations to come.